First is new ideologies. These new ideologies, which we discussed as critical race theory, critical caste theory, new ideas of social justice, new ideas of who's the oppressor and who's the oppressed. This is the ideological warfare that has been going on. And a large ecosystem of such people has been constructed both internationally and in India. That is the surprising part for many of you, that such people exist in India. In fact, they're leading such activities. The second tectonic force is education. Harvard, as the sort of epicenter, has created a huge amount of discourse on this and given it international currency because of the Harvard name. And unfortunately, our national education policy has imported many of those ideas into liberal arts. And now, a further development has just been announced some weeks ago that foreign universities will be allowed to open campuses, thinking like they're doing us a favor. So what it means is that the people I'm criticizing, the people I've been fighting 30 years of my life, are now being welcome. I'm fighting on behalf of our country, our culture, and I'm taking all the hits because MEA is not fighting. And the people who are are supposed to be the watchdogs and looking after our civilization, they're not sticking their head out, facing them and fighting. They're here talking to like-minded people. But I'm out there fighting and facing all the anger and all the whatever comes back. And now all of a sudden I realize that they have slipped the ground from under my feet because our own government has said, okay, we welcome those people. Indian industrialists like Mahindra and Lakshmi Mittal and Piramal and Tatas and Bajaj and all these people, Ranayan Murthis, they are funding these kind of forces overseas. They are giving their money and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars to fund them. And we have shown dozens and dozens of examples of the anti-India stuff that's coming out of there. One of the worst things that's happening is the use of foreign indexes. Foreign index means like Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Index, ESG Index. Now there is an index on religious pluralism for the corporate. An American foundation closely linked with Harvard and with the church and with the World Economic Forum has developed an index to measure how much religious pluralism you have in your company. And now they are going to launch in India in September with big Indian organizations. Technology giants from the US and China are data mining. They use this data to weaponize algorithms. These algorithms partly understand us, partly manipulate us. It's like the person who understands you very closely also can use that to manipulate you. So the more somebody understands you, the more they can manipulate you, and for that they need big data, and that is what these people are doing. And I call this digital colonization. A lot of organizations like Omidyar Network are not only doing surveillance, but using the surveillance to make policies, and a part of the Indian government policy makers to create policies which are good for Indian freedom and human rights and all of that. Plus, because they have deep pockets, they are far worse than Soros, by the way. They have deep pockets. They influence the Indian youth because they're investing in the ventures of these young people. Chinese have infiltrated a whole lot of Indian technology for data mining and for creating these algorithms. Algorithms become trained to serve as breaking India forces. So you don't need a human being to write an op-ed or to stop this one, deplatform that one, boost that one. The algorithms are able to do all that. The person who owns the algorithm has the power because the owner of the algorithm is the final authority on what these algorithms will be optimized to do, what is the success they're trying to achieve, and then these algorithms go and do all sorts of things. So when I complain to one of these social media platforms that they have been unfair to something I posted, they just pass it on to some algorithm. And they say that the algorithm decides, as if algorithm is God, Even though education is very important, and I'm very critical that we need to improve our education system, more important than educating children is the education of algorithms. Because algorithms are like the teachers of tomorrow. Azim Premji has created an organization where a lot of billionaires are putting in their money, and then this money is allocated to all sorts of media people in India, who then write all kind of articles. So instead of going after one journalist and here and one journalist there, I think you have to track the money source and the source of knowledge. Where is this? Who funds it? And then who funds that? And then who funds that?
I would like to welcome and thank Shri Rajiv Malhotra and Dr. Vijaya Viswanathan to the VIF once again for today's Vimarsh discussion. You would recall that on 30th September last year, the VIF had organized an event to release the author's much celebrated book, Snakes in the Ganga, Breaking India 2.0. The 800 pages are very well researched, have a lot of information and data. And this book exposes the expanding ecosystem of Hindu phobia in the Western academic and media circles. Regrettably, Indian scholars, universities, and other institutions are also being roped into this. And this is the point which was made by the authors in that discussion. The book has raised awareness in India about the complex, ongoing information warfare that impacts Indian society and India's national security. So I think it has made a tremendous contribution to the shenanigans of in the Western circles and their much wider impact on national security. So we can say that today's event is in continuation of our previous discussion. Shri Rajiv Malhotra and Dr. Vijaya Viswanathan are going to speak on the 7 tectonic forces undermining India and how to confront and defeat them.
Thank you for inviting me. This is a further elaboration of the work we presented in the context of Snakes in the Ganga. But you don't need to have seen heard the previous talk or read the book to understand this. You can understand this as a further crystallization and read the book at any time you want. The 7 tectonic forces I want to talk about basically are forces because we have not studied the root cause, and these forces come out of a root cause, which is what in my previous book, Being Different, I call Western Universalism. Western Universalism means the West has certain experience of history and philosophy, what happened to the West. And so based on that, they've developed social sciences and all kind of theories, which they project on the entire world. And they universalize their theories as being applicable to everybody else, as though we don't have our own social theories. So this Western Universalism means the widespread use of Western social sciences, what they think of, what is their idea of secularism, of democracy, of human rights, of social justice, of feminism, and on and on and on. And this gets sort of projected everywhere. Thanks to the English language, it's become pretty widespread. Now, Purva Paksha is our traditional method of reversing the gaze and examining other people at a very deep level. And we have not done enough Purva Paksha of Western social sciences, with the result that we are reactive. When something happens, BBC says something, Jai Shankar reacts. When George Soros says something, then Jai Shankar reacts, Prime Minister reacts, or whoever reacts, our intellectuals react. But they are unable to understand what is the deep causation. There is superficial causation, and which is like if you go to a doctor, he just cures your problems superficially. But if you go to a very good doctor, a good Ayurvedic doctor, he'll want to understand the root cause. And the root cause is much deeper. Unless you understand the root cause, you're really not going to solve the problem. You might solve some symptoms temporarily. So it's insufficient and inadequate to counter the BBC report or some report in Wall Street Journal or some human rights report from the US or whatever, or George Soros and so on. That's like putting out fires, and there's no limit to how many such fires will keep coming unless we go to the root cause. So Many years ago, I developed something called 5 waves of Indology. Indology is a study of India, and there are 5 waves. Starting with Marxism, and then post-colonial studies, and then subaltern studies, and so on and so forth. And each of them produced its own discourse on India, and created a whole ecosystem of people who followed that discourse. These were planted in the media, in our academic system, in our policy making, and so on. And till today, you see this kind of approach to the study of India in our NCRT books. For example, if you take sociology, or you look at the UPSC exam, you'll see all of this there. It really hasn't changed a whole lot. So it's not surprising that the West has come up with what you may call the 6th wave, which are described in Snakes in the Ganga, which takes all these previous waves of studying us and makes it go even further. I won't discuss all the details of what it is, but I will tell you what are the seven-pronged tsunami that this has resulted in, because we have not taken care of it. First is new ideologies. These new ideologies, which we discussed as critical race theory, critical caste theory, new ideas of social justice, new ideas of who's the oppressor and who's the oppressed. This is the ideological warfare that has been going on. And a large ecosystem of such people has been constructed both internationally and in India. That is the surprising part for many of you, that such people exist in India. In fact, they're leading such activities. The second tectonic force is education. Harvard, as the sort of epicenter, has created a huge amount of discourse on this and given it international currency because of the Harvard name. And unfortunately, our national education policy has imported many of those ideas into liberal arts. The NEP is very good for STEM, science, technology, medicine, engineering, these kind of things. But when it comes to liberal arts and social sciences, it just says, it opens the floodgates and says we should include liberal arts in IITs and IIMs and all that. But since we have not taken the time and effort to cultivate our own idea of liberal arts, like Vedic liberal arts, for example. So what happens is these positions are filled by people trained in Harvard or trained by others who've been trained in Harvard. So this, you are really importing a kind of Western Harvard-type liberal arts into Indian technology enterprises, which is actually making things worse. And now a further development has just been announced some weeks ago, that foreign universities will be allowed to open campuses, thinking like they're doing us a favor. So what it means is that the people I'm criticizing, the people I've been fighting 30 years of my life, are now being welcome. I'm fighting on behalf of our country, our culture, and I'm taking all the hits because MEA is not fighting. And the people who are are supposed to be the watchdogs and looking after our civilization, they're not sticking their head out, facing them and fighting. They're here talking to like-minded people. But I'm out there fighting and facing all the anger and all the whatever comes back. And now all of a sudden I realize that they have slipped the ground from under my feet, because our own government has said, okay, we welcome those people. And there is no controls in that. So what will happen is the UGC controls the syllabus of Indian universities, what they'll teach. But it is very clear that in this agreement, that UGC will have no control over what the other foreigners teach. So foreigners will have more freedom than our own universities. It's not even a level playing field. Also, UGC controls salaries and tuitions and so on. And now it says very clearly they will not control the salaries of these foreign universities, nor the tuition levels. So what will happen is they will bring in entirely the curriculum of the people that we've been fighting against. They will bring in all those professors. They will suck up the best faculty in India by giving them double, triple the salary, and charge high fees so that the elitist students from elitist families can afford it. And then they'll come up with their own quota to see who is on their side and give them free seats and all that. So they will be educating the next generation. What can be more foolish than allowing that and, in fact, welcoming that? The third of the tectonic forces I've listed are Indian industrialists. It's very strange that Indian industrialists like Mahindra and Lakshmi Mittal and Piramal and Tatas and Bajaj and all these people, Ranayan Murthis, they are funding these kind of forces overseas. They're giving their money and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars to fund them. And we have shown dozens and dozens of examples of the anti-India stuff that's coming out of there. But our people are funding it. So their name is on it. So when a professor from such a university whose title says Lakshmi Mittal and Family Director of South Asia Studies, or his title is Mahindra, Director of Mahindra Humanities Center at Harvard, or his title is Reliance Dhirubhai Ambani Professor at Stanford. These are very credible titles. Any doors open in India. They come in here and they're welcome. But what people haven't done even the basic research to see who are these professors. Some of the most anti-India professors are these. So we've allowed this to happen. And then foreign consultants. There's a lot of foreign consultants, the Deloitte and E&Y and the McKinsey's and PricewaterhouseCoopers and these sort of people are all over the place giving advice on what is meant by diversity. They're bringing the American idea of diversity here, which they don't really understand, and writing policy for Niti Aayog. Some of them are consultants for Niti Aayog. A lot of the artificial intelligence, data mining, data security policies are being written by these people. We need policies to protect us from them. But actually they are the ones writing these policies. And they're often doing it as a favor. We think they're doing us a favor because they're more advanced, they're more sophisticated. इनको ज़्यादा मालूम होगा, गोरे लोग हैं, इनको पता होगा, तो इन्होंने हमको शाबाश कह दिया तो बहुत अच्छा होगा. We have this inferiority complex. And one of the worst things that's happening is the use of foreign indexes. Foreign index means like diversity, equity, inclusion index, ESG index. Now there is an index on religious pluralism for the corporate. An American foundation closely linked with Harvard and with the church and with the World Economic Forum has developed an index to measure how much religious pluralism you have in your company. And now they are going to launch in India in September with big Indian organizations. This September they're announced already. And in the US, if you see the pattern, they're entering all these big multinationals and creating in the HR department a cell which promotes religious pluralism. But religious pluralism as measured by them is according to their idea of what is meant by pluralism. So they brought me on their board of advisors and I joined just to learn. And then I learned how they're operating, what they're doing. And then I started raising issues. They asked me to write an article in their newsletter. They said, oh, India is so great. Hinduism is so pluralistic. It is so important. We finally have a good voice. You have to tell us, please. We are very interested in you. All that nice stuff they know how to do. So when I turned in an article which is very clear, they said that these few paragraphs we have to remove. So I said, well, if you remove these paragraphs, then it's not what I want to say. Well, anyway, they published my article without a few of the paragraphs, and I resigned. Because I said I don't want you to use my name in a way that is not very honest. The fourth area, the tectonic force, is technical giants. Technology giants from the US and China are data mining. They use this data to weaponize algorithms. These algorithms partly understand us, partly manipulate us. It's like the person who understands you very closely also can use that to manipulate you. So the more somebody understands you, the more they can manipulate you, and for that they need big data, and that is what these people are doing. And I call this digital colonization. Unfortunately, India doesn't have any precautions. You'll see many examples. Harvard collaborating with Niti Aayog on data mining. Kriya University and Yale University doing data mining in the villages in Tamil Nadu, huge number of tens of thousands of villages capturing all kind of data. Ashoka and the French Ministry of External Affairs, they have database on every single election since independence, down from the panchayat level to the central government level and all the states, municipalities. every little detail of who won, who lost, the demographics, what the trends are by district, by every kind of variable possible. And they're training their algorithms to predict, to understand how Indian democracy works, who to manipulate, where are the fault lines, where are the pressure points, how do you get in. And nobody has bothered that, hey, listen, this is very valuable insight. Why are we letting these people in? And they are collaborating with the help of Indian institutions, like Ashoka is one of them. So then a lot of organizations like Omidyar Network are not only doing surveillance, but using the surveillance to make policies. And a part of the Indian government, policy makers, to create policies which are good for Indian freedom and human rights and all of that. Plus, because they have deep pockets, they are far worse than Soros, by the way. They have deep pockets. They influence the Indian youth because they're investing in the ventures of these young people. They've invested $500 million in India, over 200 ventures, startup ventures in technology, and they're taking the bright technical minds of India by giving them venture capital investment. They're winning them over ideologically, so that these people, this will be a huge army, a huge footprint they have all over India, with young people, young Indians doing the dirty work, young Indians doing it, but not aware that they are doing this work that could be harmful. These young people you can't blame because they're getting a job. Somebody more strategic has to connect the dots and figure out what's going on and do something about it. So you can't blame these young people who are working for Omidyar Network. There was recently a big scandal that Qualcomm used their funding to fund an organization which was doing conversion in a village, and somebody blew the whistle. He had to leave Qualcomm, and he's written all these articles. So this sort of mischief is going on. Chinese have infiltrated a whole lot of Indian technology for data mining and for creating these algorithms. So now what you have is algorithms become trained to serve as breaking India forces. So you don't need a human being to write an op-ed or to stop this one, deplatform that one, boost that one. The algorithms are able to do all that. The person who owns the algorithm has the power, because the owner of the algorithm is the final authority on what these algorithms will be optimized to do, what is the success they're trying to achieve, and then these algorithms go and do all sorts of things. So when I complain to one of these social media platforms that they have been unfair to something I posted, they just pass it on to some algorithm, and they say that the algorithm decides, as if algorithm is God, and because algorithm decided, therefore I have no argument, that sort of strange situation. Now, Indians have failed to create our own platforms, whether it's operating systems, whether it's search engines, whether it is a language model like ChatGPT, whether it is AI engines, all kind of things that are driving this new digital economy. We think that digitization means give broadband and inexpensive terminal, but we have not bothered about the content and who controls this content and who controls the algorithms deciding which content people are seeing. So the kids in the villages who have this broadband and who may have these terminals and these mobile phones, the question is, what is the content they're watching and who decides the type of content which gets promoted and boosted? That is something that our people have not given much attention to. The punchline of what I'm saying is that even though education is very important, and I'm very critical that we need to improve our education system, more important than educating children is the education of algorithms. Because algorithms are like the teachers of tomorrow. Like you do teacher training as more important than training the students, because if you train the teachers, they will train the students. And you have more leverage. One teacher you train, he will train thousands of students. So it's better to train the teachers. But now the algorithms are the teachers. This whole new education system all over the world is turning into AI-based education. And so the people who have all these AI platforms are the ones who are in position to develop courses on all kinds of things and sneak in biases, civilizational biases, and the way those algorithms have been trained, sometimes very subtly, is going to be like having a teacher in class who's got a certain bias. But the scale is much bigger. The scale is huge compared to human teachers. And people have this false sense of security that because it's a computer and the computer doesn't have emotions, therefore it must be neutral. That's what we are told, but none of that is true. Now, the fifth one is media. There is the Newman Media School at Harvard in collaboration with Pulitzer. And they have collaborated with people in India, like Azim Premji has created an organization where a lot of billionaires are putting in their money, and then this money is allocated to all sorts of media people in India, who then write all kind of articles. So instead of going after one journalist and here and one journalist there, I think you have to track the money source and the source of knowledge. Where is this? Who funds it, and then who funds that, and then who funds that, and also where is this knowledge coming from, all the way back to the ideology. Where are the ideology centers? Where are these ideology centers where they're training the BBC people, where they're training the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post people? So unless you go to the real adda, the root, you are not solving the problem. And the irony is that not only we are ignoring the root, we are actually supporting them. We're sending Indian bureaucrats to be trained overseas by these kind of places. And we are also, funding some of these places. So that's kind of a tragedy. The sixth is the judiciary. Now, this may surprise you, but Justice Chandrachud is very fond of quoting all these kind of people. He, in fact, in one lecture after another, he quotes all these theories that are coming from overseas. So his views are not like he has independently come up with all this. He is informed by these things. He is well connected with they celebrate him as a very successful product. Imagine you have created a product and put him in the head of the Supreme Court. It's a very big deal. You are successful. What more could you want? You take the biggest democracy and you put the top guy in the Supreme Court who's your product. What a big deal. I mean, it's like if I was telling one RSS leader the other day, it's like you have a Shakha product and he's one of the pracharaks, and you make him head of some country's top government or something. You will say, wow, we are running that country. So that is how successful this is, to have these kind of people planted here. Finally, is the most sensitive and controversial of the 7 tectonic forces, and that is the myopic Hindus, our own people, who actually are sometimes very proud of these kind of things which are harming us, sometimes ignorant, sometimes they will apologize for them and justify them and say, no, this is fine. But ultimately it's because they haven't really worked hard, they haven't studied it, they are ignorant about it. And so we are impressed with a superficial approach to civilization. We have symbols, we build a temple here, we change the name of a road, we start having some holidays and rituals and so on. All this is very important. The superficial narrative is very emotionally important for people. It will get you votes. But there are deeper levels of narrative which have to do with policy making, which have to do with the deep systems like the algorithms I talked about. Unless we control those, a superficial approach to solving the problem is not going to be enough. Give us, in fact, a false sense of security. So with that, I will close. Those are I'll just list what the 7 are real quick, and then I will close and we can have Q&A later. So number 1, ideologies. Number 2, education. Number 3, Indian industry. Number 4, tech giants. Number 5, the media trained overseas. Number 6, Indian judiciary. And number 7, myopic Hindus. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Namaskar. I just want to give a few examples to drive home the points that Rajivji just made. So let's look at the report card of Western liberal arts, and by liberal arts, I'm loosely translating it as social sciences. Now, in America, you find a whole generation of youngsters educated in Western liberal arts, social sciences, who are skillless, who have no skill and cannot be employed. Because studies like a major in gender studies and African American studies and anything ending with studies is thought of as just a narrative and a program in indoctrination, which leaves you skillless. In fact, this is happening in Ashoka University too. We pay 40 lakhs for a 4-year course in gender studies. Ashoka University proudly says that unlike other gender studies program, we actually have gender and sexuality studies, which is sort of the up-to-date latest in these kinds of hoax subjects. But anyway, so these youngsters in America are not able to find jobs. Yeah. Not only that, they are saddled with heavy loans because they've taken tens of thousands of dollars to pay for this education. And now Joe Biden is trying to forgive these loans in order to get their votes. But essentially, you have a generation that is graduating, have no skills, are burdened with a lot of loans and living in their parents' basements. This is what's happening in America. So we have to first see if this is actually working in the country that produced this kind of knowledge, and whether it's working for them, and what are the merits of that. Now, interestingly, the left is very smart and organized and institutionalized. So the only jobs that these people can get are the ones that are academic end up getting into academia to produce more of this nonsense academic papers, and the others who cannot get into academics will end up joining DEI offices and administrative positions in universities. You'd be surprised to know that most of these so-called top universities in the US, Yale University, for example, has a 1-to-1 ratio of undergrad student to administrative staff. These are not professors teaching. So for every undergraduate student in Yale, and the undergraduate population is around 1,500 students, there are 1,500 administrative positions. And guess who's paying for it? It is the undergraduate student. And no wonder they're saddled with debt. So this is how they get employment. Yeah, they are non-value added, unskilled, just fat in the system that everybody's paying for. Now, the left is also very smart and cunning about placing these same people in corporates where Rajivji talked about ESG, which is an environment, social justice, and governance, which is now part of every corporate HR department, where they do caste sensitivity training, diversity training, things like that. So these are the people that go into these positions to do this kind of training. And all this is coming into India. You have DEI offices in IIT Delhi. We not only have we teaching social sciences in India at the IITs and the IIMs, we're also having DEI offices and increasing the administrative burden. And guess who's paying for it? It's taxpayer money for this unnecessary kind of diversity training and caste sensitivity training. So we have to ask ourselves before bringing in all this, what has it produced overseas? Very objectively, it's just not an ideological thing. Is it producing anything of value addition? And so this is how we can successfully unskill India. All this talk of skilling India, we are actually going to be using hard-earned money and bringing in these universities and pumping in our own money, and they're going to have non-profit status and tax exemption and all of this, and producing unskilled workers who can do nothing else than activism. That's all they're fit for. And so we should really sit down and ask if we should even bother educating a whole generation. I think they are better off not going to college, honestly. So the other point I wanted to make on what we could do, Rajivji talked about owning these indexes and doing surveys. We definitely need to do some survey on China studies. How is China studies done in India? How is China trying to indoctrinate Indians through Chinese studies program? And this is like the Confucius Institutes. We have to study them carefully to see what is being taught, who's teaching it, whose narrative is it, and where this whole program is going. Because Ashoka University also has a China studies program, which has all kinds of links. So we need to look at that. Now, many of you may know that recently the Seattle City Council passed an ordinance saying that caste would be protected like race, and there should be no discrimination as it relates to caste. Now, this is a small city council, and this is an ordinance that was passed, but it has tremendous impact. If this gets rolled out, which I think it will, through many more cities in the US, you can have caste as a protected category all over US, which will affect tens of thousands of Hindus and Indians in the diaspora, because this basically says that anybody could take offense or could consider any offense as a caste-based offense between two Indians, and there's no way to actually prove this. And caste and any kind of discrimination is taken very seriously in the West. And this has huge repercussions, and corporates are going to adopt it, and then this is going to come into India through the corporates, and they're going to mandate these kinds of rules within the corporation where everybody will be forced. It's like a thought reform process where they'll be forced to go through caste sensitivity training, and you have to atone for things that you never did, even just to get out of the caste training. So these are all very serious matters. They are programs to brainwash and have a thought reform like the Maoist Chinese kind of cultural reform, right? So there are thought reform programs through diversity, equity, inclusion training. So these are very, very serious issues that we should look at. Another interesting sort of study that came out from Pew Research, and this is an example to show that we don't own any of these surveys or indices, but how far the left has gone. So they have a few years ago, Pew Charitable Trust, which is a very big nonprofit in the US, conducted something called Cultural Chauvinism Survey. And I was so surprised to see what they asked. They went around Europe and asked people, do you think that your culture is superior to other cultures? And I would think that's a positive thing. In fact, we just launched a book called Varna Jati Caste, where we talk about Varna pride and how important it is to have Varna pride. And because if you have a strong sense of identity, nobody can turn you into an activist or manipulate you, because the identity holds you in good stand. So they go around Europe and asking people, do you think your culture is superior to others? And of course, wherever wokeism has infiltrated, which is in Western Europe, only 20 to 40%, Spain being the worst, France bad, around 30%, said that they didn't think that their culture was superior. Whereas Russia and Eastern Europe, the percentage of people who said their cultures were superior was around 70%. And so the French education minister saw this survey and got really rattled by it. And he immediately said that, he wanted to introduce, develop culture in the youth and introduce the classics back into education, Latin and Greek back into education. So that he thought that this would be a good way to fight the proliferation of wokeism in France. So I wonder if we did such a similar survey, what the results would be. But these are things that we should be doing, because we should own these indices and also put out surveys on Hinduphobia overseas where they weaponize caste. And we should also look at how all these ideologies are affecting our own youth in India itself. So with that, I can answer questions later. Thank you.
one can't disagree with what Rajiv has said. So what does one discuss? We say we agree. Genuinely, I find it very difficult to disagree with him on any of the points that he has made. The issue is not agreement or disagreement. The issue is what do we do? And there I don't have any answer to give, because what we do is not simply government deciding or bureaucrats deciding. The society has to decide. And how do you mobilize the society? And since we differ on every single issue, and more today, then how do we mobilize society to understand, appreciate the depth of these problems and have consensus building which spans the entire country? There's a clear divide in many ways between the North and the South, where you can see that the non-BJP ruled states have a particular view of our social problems and our plurality and our religious composition and what we should do with regard to minority issues. And there is, in fact, in some cases, a campaign against Hinduism as such. So how do you then, at the national level in a federal system, create that consensus which goes deep into how we live effectively? The challenges that you mentioned, therefore, to my mind, are not so easy to address. Now, with regard to the new ideologies, critical race theory, and deciding who are the oppressed and who are the oppressors, and critical caste theory. Now, the problem is that all these new ideas percolate very, very easily into India. At one level, the fact that we are English speaking has always been talked by us as being of great advantage. Though, mind you, sometimes I ask myself, the Chinese don't speak any wretched English language, and look at them. Their economy is 4 or 5 times bigger. The Japanese don't speak much English language, but they have been able to develop their economies. But somehow we feel that unless we have access to the English language, we somehow can't become modern and advanced and be a player in the world. Now, because we have this English language, we are exposed immediately, meaning all the society at large, especially the student community, through social media even more and more, immediately exposed to all these ideas. And since they come from the West, they look very fashionable. And youngsters are very proud to imbibe these ideas to show how much more advanced they are sociologically than other more backward, ignorant kind of people who have not absorbed these ideas. The other day I was at the Hindu college speaking, and I asked the students who had organized this talk for me as to what was the depth of infiltration of these woke ideas into the student community, and I was told very considerable. So there it is. How do you combat them? And when it comes to caste, our political system is encouraging caste in a very obvious way, in the sense that caste factors, no matter what discourse we give that some of BJP's programs are such and policies are such that they're going beyond caste and stuff like that. But the fact is that the consideration of caste is central to our doing politics. People may have this or that view. The caste census that the Bihar is organizing, purely from the point of view of diluting the element of caste in our politics, in our society, this kind of a thing of now making caste surveys and see how many percentages there are of different variety of castes, and on that basis then reservation should be given. So this is another way of dividing society and not being able to go beyond caste. So when you have this critical caste theory being developed in the United States, and the Seattle Council does this, and the instigator of that is a lady from India, of Indian origin. That becomes then the benchmark of what we should do here. And I find the Indian Express has a regular column on Dalitology or something like that, which, mind you, in terms of an analysis of what the situation, historical and present, is not wrong. But what I find is that the purpose of this, and because a lot of distortions in what I read those articles, a lot of distortions in them, and the purpose is actually to create further divisions. And there are these foreign scholars, Christoph Jaffrelot and others, who actually try and probe these fault lines. And they do a lot of research. It's not as if it is not researched properly. They do a lot of research. But it's the constant focus. Ignore everything else, ignore anything positive that is happening, but keep plugging away at this so that nobody forgets that this is a big problem in India, which needs to be resolved. So it's part of their narrative against India. Now, with regard to the liberal new education policy, when it was announced, now I'm not an expert on educational matters, but my first reaction, which I put on my Twitter thing also, was that by all means have the universities come into the technical side, but for heaven's sake, don't bring them into the liberal arts, because then you are creating absolutely the kind of problems that Rajiv is talking about, or Vijaya is talking about. But yet, I think when it comes to coming into the area of technology and stuff like that, there are not those kind of profits to be made. But when it comes to the liberal arts, then it's much easier to make money and then create this whole bunch of unskilled people who have no particular use to the society in terms of modernizing and developing it, but in terms of job creation, maybe. So, but then the UGC chairman seems to believe that this is a very good idea, and he has defended this policy in a big write-up in one of the papers. And then the thought occurred to me, which again is a very banal thought, there's nothing profound in it, that if we talk about our heritage, about our great universities, Nalanda, what have you, and suddenly we find that we are unable to develop our own educational system, and we need the West to come here and improve it and set up a university. So what happened to all the great tradition that we hark back to, the biggest university in the world at one time and stuff like that? So there is a big gap in what we talk about our heritage and everything else, and on the ground, this sort of mixed messaging where we think that the only way out for us is to imbibe fully Western education. With regard to Indian industrialists, setting chairs in foreign universities, it has been criticized, but many of these have been educated in Harvard or in Yale or in Wharton and this and that, and somehow they feel that they owe something to these institutions, and then it gives them an international profile. So there's ego involved in this. So they do this. If they were doing it on a large scale in India, maybe, yes, we could understand this little weakness of theirs to earn foreign applause. But I think this is an issue in the context of the problems that have been raised. With regard to technology, data mining, and everything else, I think our people understand this, but we are not sure as to how to deal with this in the context of two things. One is that there's immense pressure on us from the Americans I've been the last couple of days attending the conferences on the I initiative for critical and emerging technologies, with a whole range of people from our side at top levels who are involved in this, because the NSAs on both sides have led this. And there is this concern that we have to have a data law which is acceptable to the Americans, because otherwise we'll not be able to capitalize internationally, especially as we want to, in terms of the India stack and everything else, and all that we've been saying during the G20 meetings and before, in preparation about the assets that we have, which we want to share with the world. So how to strike a balance where we are able to project ourselves in this area abroad, and yet do it in a manner in which we do not have a clash with the big tech American and the American administration. Until now, we were able to resist some of these pressures on us by saying that, look, no, we can't sign off on this, we can't sign off on that, as we didn't sign in Japan, in Tokyo, when they had a document which our Prime Minister did not sign, that we don't have a data law ourselves. So once we have a data law, then we can know what we are committing ourselves to. But sooner rather than later, we won't have that excuse left, because we'll have a data law. And then we'll have to take a position. In the case of media, I've been time and again making this point, which of course everybody is impervious to, that our data, our media is that of a banana republic. You know, Rajiv is here, we know, in order to get your views into the Western press by an ambassador, very, very, very difficult. They won't give you access. I have personal experiences of that, but I did get access in Egypt or countries like that, where again they suffer from the same kind of weaknesses as we do. But when it came to France, I tried very hard, but I wrote an article for Le Monde at their request. They won't publish it because it stated government position. They don't want a government position. They are comfortable if it is an anti-government position, so Arundhati Roy can write and they'll accept it. But here, and I'm amazed that every other day, foreign ambassadors are writing in our press, condemning Russia on Ukraine, this and that, knowing fully well that our government's position on our relations with Russia is known. It's a friendly country, and the diplomatic etiquette is that third country ambassadors in a friendly country don't attack third countries with which India is friendly. But this is, now, yesterday or day before, Borrell was interviewed in Indian Express or something, and leading questions, asking him, what do you think about India's position on Ukraine? What do you think of this? What do you think? All the issues on which they have been critical, you ask them questions. You give them an occasion to pronounce on them, and then you publish it. I don't understand that. I know why this is happening. But still, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, all of us, we may be in different capacities in our country, bureaucrats or journalists or this or that, but the country is the country, and the national interest is the national interest. It doesn't mean that journalists can have a view of national interest which totally differs from the view of the rest of society. But we have this fellow, Yafralo, who writes regularly, and I've told the Indian Express, well, why do you do that? And then they have this Ashutosh Vachni, and I was surprised that he other day visited India and went to Gujarat and someplace and has written another piece that was, well, not too bad a piece, because the sense of the piece was a bit different, but he did introduce towards the end some negative pet theories of his about our social things. But they come and go, and they do the studies. I think we should have some mechanism where these busybodies are not allowed to come to India. But they do. Then judiciary, it is becoming too much. Now, yesterday or day before, the Supreme Court has said that the CGI will be a part of the appointments committee of the election commissioner and the chief election commissioner. So I tweeted on that that the FBI in the United States, the crime agency in the UK, which are counterparts of our FBI, the National Crime Agency, the election commissions in the United States, and the election commission in the UK. Nothing to do with the judiciary. Nothing at all. But yet, the CGI is a part of this. It's a big slap in the face of the government that on this particular article of the Constitution, the president appoints the election commissioners. Why is the government ceding its executive power to the judiciary so easily? There's no fight back at all. And that is emboldening when I think if there's contempt of court here, I suppose we are protected from that in the Vivekananda International Foundation or not. But I really do find the conduct of the Chief Justice, and I've been following his speech. Incidentally, I asked a few people when I go abroad as to whether Chief Justices or justices in the country talk so much as our judges and Chief Justices do. They don't. And for a very good reason. Their job is to deliver justice, not to propound to the public their social theories, their this theory, their that theory, because then that compromises their neutrality in the eyes of those who want justice from the judiciary. But we do that here for every little convocation invited, and they give you long lectures, or when they deliver judgments, they pontificate on all sorts of social issues. I don't know what's happening, and the government is unable to control this. And finally, you said something about myopic Hindus. Yes, I think it is an issue because we are not aware of what the issues are, what the problems are, what damage it is doing to us, what damage it can do to us in the future. We somehow have this feeling we have survived for 5,000 years and we'll survive for another 5,000 years. And this has been our line of defense, even in diplomacy. When we've been attacked, we say, look, don't worry. We are a 5,000-year-old civilization and we have survived. All of the old civilizations of the West and East have disappeared, but we have survived, so we are not worried. But I think our civilization may not be collapsed, but we have to manage ourselves and develop ourselves and reach the kind of stature globally that we aspire to, and of course for the welfare of our people. Whether we can do that with all the lack of awareness of the forces working against us is an issue that. And finally, this Vasudev Kutumbakam. The other day, the judges of the Supreme Court said that, Hinduism is a way of life. We have those who have come and invaded us have been assimilated. So I asked the question, then why did the temples get razed? Why did conversions take place? Why was India divided? Because the people whom we assimilated, they just divided, took away a large part of our country. And why is there terrorism? So this business about believing in these kind of shibboleths and not applying your mind, and at that level of society, is ridiculous, but there it is. So, Rajivji, I don't think the problems you have raised will be solved very easily, but keep trying.
I'm going to propose, in rapid fire succession, actionable things. Actionable things. Billionaires funding the wrong kind of things. How about if the action item is, I would like Vivekananda International Foundation to invite these people, and I would like to debate them right here. Let's hear why are they funding, what's their logic, what do they get out of it, and is there a better alternative? If their goal is to return back to their alma mater, Mahindra could fund something in automobile engineering because he'll get benefit out of it, and also he has the capability to appreciate it and evaluate how his money is being used. But having funded the world's most prominent postmodernist scholar in deconstructing the very concept of India, it's not helping his automobile industry. It's nothing to do with his own education, what he studied there, and he certainly doesn't have the capability to evaluate it. So I think we can give them some constructive suggestions that can you make your grant giving more relevant. So, but in any case, in the spirit of open discussion, we ought to have forums where we can talk. And if they don't want to do it publicly, you can at least host something privately. Maybe you can have a private conversation with them, but we need to open that. Regarding, we can do nothing because the big tech is too powerful and all that. We're not talking about controlling them. We're not talking about nationalizing them. We're not talking about anything like that. India has the largest manpower of technocrats, software developers, AI developers in the world. But they're not developing intellectual property for India. They're developing intellectual property for the big tech Americans. This is not a matter of stopping those big tech companies. It's a matter of our billionaires using our brains to develop our own platforms, our own language model, our own AI models, our own search engines. Rather than if you hire somebody for $10,000 and rent him out for $40,000, you make good profit. But if you hire the same person and you develop intellectual property that we own, then rather than licensing back that technology and becoming dependent on it, we become a source of technology, we export it. That is what China did. China has its own alternatives to Google and Facebook and all of those guys because China invested in their own make in China. We invested in let's sell the brains. So it's a matter of policy. It's a matter of policy by the Ministry of IT. It's a short-term versus long-term trade-off. It is not like we're trying to stop the big tech. It's a question of can we change our policy on how to invest in technology and what should be our focus. So it is in our hands to have these policies. We can do that. We can make tax incentives or some other kinds of incentives for those who invest in Indian intellectual property. India has one of the lowest R&D allocations of GDP in the world. It's a fraction of the percentage of GDP in the United States or China or any of the European countries. So we do not invest in R&D. We rent the brain, let that guy use our brain to make technology and license it back to him. And then we are saying there's nothing we can do. Okay? So there is something we can do. Data mining. The Americans want to have India's data policy something that they can accept. I propose India should follow Europe. European Union has one of the best data protection laws relative to other places. And certainly Europe can stand up to the United States. India should collaborate with the EU and develop something because EU raises the same sort of issues I'm raising. EU raises those issues and EU has a more aggressive policy. In fact, EU has fined many of these American companies huge sums of money. The Europeans have fined them for violation. So we could piggyback on Europe and that'll give us some clout with the Americans perhaps, rather than standing up to them directly ourselves. Ministry of External Affairs could use some training. I mean, I find that the consulate generals here and there that I come across are kind of uninformed about all these kind of things. And so they could use, this is actionable. MEA could say, okay, let's have some workshops, let's have some seminars, let's bring in subject matter experts and let's teach them. There's no reason why they couldn't learn these kind of things. Foreign campuses in India. There's nothing wrong if their policy were that this should be a level playing field and they shall enjoy no advantages over Indian universities. I mean, what's wrong with that? Why would you say that they don't have any restrictions which the Indian universities have? It's like saying that we want to invite foreign manufacturers and they will have no restrictions like the Indian manufacturers have. Then you are obviously set up for defeat. It would be, the complaint would be if you handicap the foreign universities compared to the Indian ones. But the policy that has been enacted right now to invite them says that they will not have any restrictions even the ones that the Indian universities have. That seems like very unfair. So you tell the Americans that we just want a level playing field. That's all. Americans understand that kind of language. And then foreign consultants. Now the thing is, foreign consultants, India has consultants. We have many consulting companies. But the Indian consulting companies are not getting, TCS is a consulting company. In the United States, doing a lot more consulting than any of the Americans with banking, with the pharma industry. With so many industries, our consulting companies are doing very well. However, in India, they are not involved in policy consulting. They're involved in technology consulting, but not in policy consulting. When it comes to policy making, we hire American consultants. Now, Ernst & Young is not a policy expert. McKinsey, you could say, okay, maybe they have something. But Deloitte is not a policy expert. They're chartered accountants, financial people, basically. But we've allowed these companies to expand beyond their traditional expertise of finance and chartered accountancy and financial controls into policy making, into things like social justice, into things like data protection and all kinds of education policies. They're helping us do that. So India is like the big fertile ground for these people to expand well beyond what they are doing in other countries. So this is a lack of our people serving international activities of the very same companies, that they cannot come here and expect a better treatment than they're getting anywhere else in the world. They have a totally open, almost like a carte blanche monopoly to consult in policy making, government policy making. And finally, nothing stops the Culture Ministry from saying, let's invest in developing Vedic-based social sciences, Vedic-based mind sciences. Now, none of this is actually hating anybody else or blocking anybody else or stopping anybody else. But these are very kind of long-term investments that we should make. So I have not seen these sort of proposals on the table from our government. And I would like to suggest that this is the sort of debate we ought to have. India should have its index on all over the world when they're studying India. How do you evaluate whether they're studying India properly or not properly? On a scale of 0 to 10, you should be able to evaluate that this university, just Jeffrey Lott gets a low score, so-and-so gets a higher score. I mean, they are evaluating us according to their drishti, their lens. We should evaluate the world according to our drishti and our criteria, which means we have to first establish our criteria. And this requires leadership from the government. And I don't see that happening. That hasn't happened so far. But if we had our indices, then we could have an annual report. I proposed this many times, that we are qualified, we are capable, we're very happy to take on this, an annual survey of how India is studied in the top 20 places in the world, and who is who, what is what, who is doing a good job, who is doing a bad job. At least put pressure on them, and at least have a report. As an independent organization, the government doesn't have to say it's their report, but at least if we are encouraged, we would be happy to do that report and set the ball in motion to push back against all this. Thank you.
There's nothing much to add, frankly, because Rajiv has listed some practical ways to address the issues that he has raised. A couple of comments on that. One is that you know what our fixation is on mobility agreements and H-1B visas and this and that. So in all our FTAs and everything else, this is very central, because we believe that we have manpower, and more we skill this manpower, it will meet the needs of the world. And it will be a huge contribution we'll be making to the global economy and earning a lot ourselves as a result, because the population in countries in Europe and in Japan, they are declining drastically. I read some statistics about Japan by 1950 or whatever it is, or later, I don't forget the timeline, will have a population of only 80 million. Europe is facing very, very serious old age problems. China has begun to face them. India has a young population, not sufficiently skilled yet, but we are, in fact, in a sense, to provide to the world a solution to their old age problems. Now, how to develop a policy where we take advantage of this obvious fact and do it in a manner which doesn't injure us in the long term in terms of brain drains or whatever else. So I don't have a solution, but there is this issue. Number two, on the MEA, I would suggest that go slow a little bit on the MEA. Because the MEA, I was quite surprised. I was looking at the new divisions they have created. There's a technology division. And in fact, they are very conscious now in the MEA that access to technology, understanding technology developments, building bridges between those technologies and India. This is a task which is now given to our ambassadors. And there's a whole division now who looks after this. So I thought I would mention that. In terms of foreign universities coming here, I just read that the Deakin University of Australia has already taken a decision. So I think the horse has bolted already, and reversing anything may be very difficult. But what surprises me is the issue of level playing field. It is so obvious, and yet we have taken a conscious decision that if we impose our norms on foreign universities, they'll never come. The other argument is that the foreign universities in any case will never come, because the big universities, Oxford, Harvard and all, they're never created. Harvard may have created in the Gulf countries, but Oxford has never created anything, and the top level universities are not going to come here, but the second order universities, but then they'll come with a different mindset altogether of making money easily and stuff like that. But what I'm surprised is that the people who the policy makers didn't see something so obvious. So what my experience in administration is that there are a lot of sensible people who look at every side of the issue. It's not as if this thing is not intensively discussed before final policy decision is taken. And I'm sure that in the internal discussions, this obvious point was raised. Now, what are the arguments on the side of those who took this decision in favor of what they are doing, which on the face of it looks invidious and damaging to our self-interest? Thing is to invite these fellows here and understand from them as to what has pushed them into taking taking a decision which seems illogical. In terms of foreign consulting agencies, I am equally surprised as you how much they've penetrated our system in policy making. Niti Yog and this and the other day, a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, I went to UP. We had a meeting with Yogi Adityanath. And this is all about what UP wants to do in terms of development. And who was in charge of all the discussions and everything else? Deloitte. And it struck me, and I pointed out, it's awkward, it's embarrassing. But the thing is that they present you Indian faces. Yes. So guys don't realize that these are American companies. They think they're one of us. And they deal with them very openly, as they do with Indians, and we get... we don't know how to handle this problem, and the Western companies have found a solution where they put up competent, eloquent, articulate Indian faces who then become much more plausible. And you never get the feeling it's some Westerner white man who's teaching you anything. And this is, they take full advantage of that. But making our own indices, issue is not indices, but I like your idea about ranking universities in terms of how they treat India studies. And then give guidance then to our own students and everything else as to where they should go and where there is a better atmosphere. I think this needs to be done. That's a very good idea I like. However, on the other side, in terms of making indices, issue is not making indices. Issue is how much resonance such indices will have internationally. You can make any index you want, but nobody will pay attention to it. You can have an editorial in the Hindustan Times, nobody will read it. But the moment these indices appear by VDEM or Freedom House or World Hunger Index or all these, it gets international publicity. because they have or economic intelligence unit or the economist, they have captured the media narratives in the world. They determine those narratives.
Two things. One is, I think the Americans have raised this level of beyond the British, because in the British era they were Gora Sabs ruling over us, so we knew that this is a British thing. Americans have really mastered this, bringing a lot of Indians into their system, whether it's Amartya Sen in Harvard or whether it's Sundar Pichai somewhere or somebody head of Deloitte. The point is, I've lived there for 52 years. I'm part of that system. I understand how it works. So you can be sure that the people who are advanced in these things are at every level, they're filtered to make sure how loyal they are to their company, their organization. Do not think that just because the guy comes and he speaks some Hindi or Bengali and he wears a tilak and he might wear a dhoti and all that stuff and play Holi with you, doesn't mean a darn thing. That's all part of pop culture. So I think what Ambassador said is absolutely correct. On the issue of we are supplying manpower, technological manpower, to a world that needs it because they have aging population and shortage. And how do we balance that with the need that we need technology? I have a proposal there, because I used to be in the technology field, and often we would do collaboration, joint ventures, where one party would supply manpower, and instead of being paid at a profitable rate, they would subsidize it and get equity in the product. So India could have a policy where, a new search engine by Google or a new product by Microsoft, we will say that we're going to put in 30,000 people, but we don't want just paid salary for them and make some money. We will get X% of equity. And so these are deals to be made that we should think about. And maybe the Googles and the Microsofts of the world have so much money, they won't go for it. But you see, for every technology that comes out of a Google or a Microsoft, there is so many more that come out of startups. So we could have a policy where we invest our labor as an equity in technological startups, so we get a percentage of the equity, and then that's how we invest in the future.
Thank you very much. I think a very rich discussion, and all these 7 threats that you raised and 6 or 7 points that you made, they are unexceptionable. And I can say one thing, that at the VIF, in numerous discussions that we hold on all kinds of topics, practically each one of those issues and points have been made. So I think we're quite well aware of where the problems are, but of course solutions are not that simple. But you have given a fairly doable list. And I'll take only one point from here, which is the technology point. And I agree with all that you have said. Day before yesterday, we had a discussion at the VIF. We had about 10 or 15 vice chancellors. We were discussing the new education policy in some aspects of it. And some years ago, we had about 30, 40 vice chancellors just before the new education policy came. And everybody realizes how important education is, what a wonderful talent we have. But these vice chancellors I found so despondent, simply because they were not able to deal with the UGC's overbearing. They were crying for autonomy in our own universities. So day before yesterday also the same thing happened. The discussion that we were holding was that how do we get students from other countries, and there are a lot of interest in Africa, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, etc. People want to come here, study not only STEM but other things also, Ayurveda, and they're all very interested. But the system is that it's not really functioning. And one of the vice chancellors said that the new education policy, there's actually some 12 point something, which says that India will become a destination for education for foreign students. And this is the right step to become a Vishwaguru, because then we will be able to tell them something. But the situation is that right now we have about 40 to 50,000 students coming to India, mostly from Africa and some other countries like that, and about 8 to 10 lakh students going out of India. Now this asymmetry, this is a big threat. No matter what we say about globalization, etc., this is a big threat. Just as the in IT field, we rented out our brains and we became software coolies.
Yes.
This must change, and you have already pointed out how this can change. Equity. In fact, I can't understand why our, like say in the field of defense, you have the DRDO, which has done some very good work, and it's very nationalistic and so on. But DRDO, why can't it go and buy off just as the Google does and buys off the startup? DRDO has enough money to do that. They don't do it. And so we are discussing it with them, and they say, "Ki jara government ko bata dijiye, वगैरह वगैरह." All that happens. No, I think we have to. The systems that we have created were for the previous century. Soon after 1947, perhaps this were, but now we need to change. And fortunately, today there is this lot of self-confidence also which is coming. It's not the Indians are today very, very confident. The students are very confident. Our startups are very confident. Our industrialists are very confident. But they're not very educated, perhaps. The wisdom is perhaps somewhere missing. And that's why I think the social sciences, our own Vedic systems, those kind of the old kalas, etc., at least some familiarization should be there. And I think your book on artificial intelligence and the tyranny of algorithms, etc., is very good point and well understood. But then, like this morning, I was talking to someone. He runs he has made some platform where he's teaching right now, as we speak, 100,000 youngsters from tribal areas and many others who are, just about 12 years old or 14 years old, because AI is being taught in Indian schools now. And he says that in about 6 months to 8 months time, he says coding for everyone. That is his motive. And he is associated with some other. So things can happen.
Yes.
And Sridhar Vembu, in fact, spoke from this forum, and he demonstrated how you can have a multi-billion-dollar company with R&D located in a rural area. And there's a whole model which is working. So I think there are these positive stories which are also there. But we are not thinking strategically, as you said. We are not thinking in a coordinated fashion. And we are wasting a lot of our time on many other things, which is not bad. But where is that original thinking? And if we today spent money on standards, I've been associated with some cyber issues and so on. The standards are made, the Chinese they spent about $10 billion starting from 2005 or 6 on 5G standards. The result was they were the first off the block in setting up the key standards. So the result was that others were latecomers. Now we're thinking of 6G, 7G, agro, space, there's so many places. But we are only right now recipient of knowledge. We are not really creating knowledge. That's why your point about IPR, about your spending money on R&D, etc. We don't have to really go to Harvard for this. We can actually do it, and because they are using our own people.
Yes.
So I think that's where the government can come, and they're very simple points. It's not rocket science that what we have to do. So thank you very much. I think we have enjoyed this, and we'll see whether we can get in some people and debate with them. But I really don't know whether they will come to debate here, but we'll see.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is the right forum. We can debate all these.
Thank you so much.
So thank you very much.
सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः